Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for dropping by this video. To anyone who's new to this channel is dedicating to helping people understand the difference between traditional or authentic non-duality and modernized, watered down nonsense non-duality, often called Neo-Advaita. You can learn more about this topic on my website, which is linked in the chat box or linked below. And before I hop into sharing a little bit, I would just like to be crystal clear. I am not a guru. I am not enlightened. Please don't blindly accept anything I say is true. And while you're at it, please don't blindly accept anything that anyone says. Blindly accept it as true, especially if they claim to be teaching on the topic of non-duality. I mean, in general, that's a good way to roll. But if someone says they're teaching non-duality, it should just send up a yellow flag, if not a red flag. They're probably not. So someone posted a beautiful comment in my last chat that I wanted to talk about a little bit. Someone wrote, damn, let me see here. Oh, no, I can't read it. Yeah. Why won't it let me? There we go. Damn, 1 second, I feel like I'm engaging with life again. Then I find myself bypassing again, really losing hope about ever getting back to how I once was before my self-inquiry, self-avoidance. Self-avoidance disguised as truth-seeking. Do you still slip into bypass mode? So this was from someone named Tiger Arts, and thank you for that comment. It's an important topic I haven't talked much about, so I'm excited to talk a little bit. So first and foremost, so Neo-Advaita is nonsense. I'm going to start calling it nonsense non-duality. And it's quite harmful. And if you take it seriously, it can really take you down a dark road. And part of that is literally bypassing your humanity, becoming inauthentic, becoming disconnected from this world, in some ways becoming kind of dysfunctional. Dysfunctional meaning behaving in non-harmonious ways in every aspect of your life. Relationships, money, work, health, mental health, especially mental health. And so the question is how to recover from that. So I propose, and it's just my proposal, it's just a theory, that part of the way to recover is to regain your humanity, because Neo-Advaita really cuts you off from your humanity. It really gets you trapped in your head and cuts you off from your physical sensations, from your feelings, and from our deeper layer of ourself, our personality, our hopes, dreams, wishes. It sure did that for me. And it doesn't just cut you off. It kind of creates a war between this formless consciousness and everything else. Traditional non-duality is about integrating those two realities. Neo-Advaita is about dismissing, and sometimes in the more crazy forms of Neo-Advaita, trying to destroy your personality or ego, which is truly impossible. That's another topic. We just need to carefully define ego. But whereas traditional non-duality is about integrating your humanity into consciousness, and then more importantly, integrating your humanity into your relationships and into society, and treating that integration and the interactions as part of your spiritual path. So that's the context for this amazing comment. So this person, I'm going to read it again. Damn, 1 second I feel like engaging with life again. Then I find myself bypassing again, really losing hope about ever getting back to how I once was before my self-inquiry, self-avoidance. Self-avoidance disguised as truth-seeking. Do you still slip into bypass mode? I do. It's not Neo-Advaita bypass mode, but let's get really clear. So I say there's two main versions of Neo-Advaita. One is just very mental, like nothing exists, your consciousness, the world isn't real, there's no self, there's no doer. It's just like this repetition of this certain set of, you could say, the Neo-Advaita creed, um, that you just repeat it over and over, and you train yourself to think in those ways, and then you start to talk to yourself in those ways, and you start to talk to other people in those ways. Like, I'm just a fictional character in a dream. Like, it's very mental and very verbal. And the other form is the just do self-inquiry, just practice self-inquiry, where you just practice this. Self-inquiry is literally where you turn away from everything, the world, your body, your feelings, your thoughts. So if you notice, attention is always going outward. Like right now, I'm looking at the screen. Right now, I'm looking out my window. Like it's always going outwards. And self-inquiry is the process of turning attention back on attention. Now, Ramana Maharshi says, for the properly prepared mind, and I'm paraphrasing, but almost exact quote, the process of self-inquiry is easy. And he said, for one who is not properly prepared, specifically, who doesn't have one-pointedness of mind, which is only possible for someone who has a primarily sattvic mind, a peaceful, contented, calm mind. He said, self-inquiry is impossible. So if you practice self-inquiry before you're ready, it creates this absolute war between engaging with the world and engaging with our, you could say, relative self. I don't like that term, with our personality. It creates an absolute war. You could say soul. And it just just as the first form of the whole mental Neo-Advaita creates a war. And so I propose that part of how we recover from this is to get in touch with our humanity, get in touch with our feelings, re-engage with life, as this person asked about. So very briefly, I realized Neo-Advaita was inaccurate and harmful in 2004. I was able to leave it in 2018, or maybe it was 19, I'm not sure. And between 2004 and 2018, I tried to get in touch with my humanity and tried to re-engage with life. And I had periods where I could do it, but really didn't. So once I left in 2018, I got pretty vigorous about trying to reconnect with my humanity, my soul, and life. And but it took me, it wasn't until 2022. So it took me another 4 years to get really committed to it. Before I was kind of like doing it a little bit, but not, and still doing all different types of spiritual bypass. So in 2022, 4 years after I left Neo-Advaita, I got really committed to it. And I really started to reconnect to my humanity, to my, getting involved in relationships, participating in a spiritual community, starting to work again, spending time in nature, starting to dance. I really got on it. And then I'm sad to say as I shared before on this channel, I have complex PTSD, some very extreme PTSD triggers happened within the spiritual community I was participating in. So I had to leave that community, and it was a huge loss. And I definitely backtracked quite a bit. And then through grace and grit, I found my way back a little bit, back to my humanity, back to living. And then I backtracked again. And so for the last 6 months, it's been a back and forth. And I think this between bypassing and between really engaging with life and living. And hi to my live viewers. You're welcome to post any questions or comments. So once I really got committed, like I said, I had a very strong streak for about 5 or 6 months. And now I'm in the phase of going back and forth. And the bypassing I'm currently doing isn't Neo-Advaita bypass. It's checking out with addictive behaviors. It's doing too many mantras. It's being too philosophical and not. So today, very in my body, very in my human self. But I think for most people who went very far down the Neo-Advaita rabbit hole, and I'm one of them, and it sounds like this person, Tiger Arts, let me double check their name. Yes, Tiger Arts is someone, and I know a couple other people personally. It really is a battle. It really is a battle because Neo-Advaita says, hey, just think these thoughts or just practice self-inquiry and all of your problems will be solved. And that's just not how life works. That's not how actual non-duality works. That's not how any spiritual path works. And so we were kind of sold this kind of like a drug, like take this drug and everything will be better. And it just doesn't work that way. But part of what it does is it creates a philosophy of escapism. That's what spiritual bypass is. Escapism. And so it's not just, spiritual bypass, you can think of it as a practice or activity, right? Like let's say I'm having a bad day and then all of a sudden I'm like, but there is no me. Everything is fine. I am the self. I am consciousness. Like that's spiritual bypass. And it'll work in the short term. Like in the short term, like, oh, I can feel, that'll help me feel better. But in the long run, it won't actually address the problems that led to me having a bad day. So that's an example of spiritual bypass. But the thing is, and so you could say that's the practice of spiritual bypass. But the thing is, Neo-Advaita is a philosophy of spiritual bypass. It's a paradigm of spiritual bypass. Once Neo-Advaita thinking gets very deep into your mind, it's hard to let go of, right? Because it promises an end to all of your problems, but doesn't deliver them. But it temporarily delivers them, just like any kind of addiction. Any kind of addiction will temporarily solve your emotional problems by getting rid of the emotions. But of course, it doesn't actually solve anything. And over time, it makes things worse. But that's why it's hard to stop an addiction, because it provides temporary relief and it creates a loop of like, well, forget it. I don't want to deal with my problems. And the long and short of it is life is messy. This is another part that Neo-Advaita doesn't like to talk about. Hey, Anton, I will respond in a moment. Thank you. Life is messy. This is a fundamental tenet of Vedic philosophy, of Sanatana Dharma, of any authentic non-dual school, is this world is full of discomfort, suffering, challenge. And Neo-Advaita doesn't even like to address that. It just tries to bypass that fact. But the long and short of it is life is challenging. Life is frustrating. That's the way of it. It's impermanent. It's constantly changing. And pain and discomfort are a daily reality, if not a moment-by-moment reality. And so the question is how to deal with that. So Neo-Advaita says, just inquire or just think these spiritual thoughts. Now that can help in some circumstances, but it doesn't solve relationship problems, work problems. As I shared, that I was doing really well at being embodied, and then there was a straight up narcissist in this spiritual group that I was participating in, and she started targeting me and coming after me, and she's been coming after people for years. And I didn't have the skills to deal with it. See, Neo-Advaita will not give you the skills to cope with life, whereas traditional Advaita is grounded in balance and in some ways cultivating a strong ego. There's this cliche that You have to have a healthy ego before you can transcend it. I think that sums up the difference between Neo-Advaita and traditional Advaita. And Neo-Advaita is like, just get rid of it. Traditional Advaita is like, hey, it's a systematic process. You actually have to have a balanced ego before you can let go of it, or it'll create a mess, as it did for me and has for many others. Anton said, escapism, and while doing it, we also think we are doing something noble. Anton, very well said. That's part of why Neo-Advaita is so hard to leave, is because we've been taught it's the absolute truth. And so, like, let's say someone has a heroin addiction, all right, and they have a bad day and they turn to heroin. No one who does that thinks to themselves, hey, this is a good thing. Like, as they're shooting up, they don't think like, hey, this is very noble or spiritual. Like, they know it's bad. They know it's harmful. By bad, I mean harmful. They know it's not going to solve the problem. But Neo-Advaita is like an addiction that lies and says the addictive behavior is healthy. It literally, you could say brainwashes. It brainwashes us into thinking that what's bad is good. What's bad and harmful is spiritual, virtuous, or as Anton said, noble. That's maybe one of Neo-Advaita's greatest tricks. Anton wrote, exactly. They're not trying to transcend their humanity with their heroin. Like, they're not thinking like, hey, this is a spiritual endeavor. Like, hey, this is going to lead me to liberation. Like, anyone who does a self-destructive, addictive behavior on a certain level knows. There can be denial, but they're definitely not thinking like, hey, this is going to lead to enlightenment. Hey, this is going to lead to an end to all of my problems. Whereas Neo-Advaita truly is an addiction and truly is a self-destructive behavior. Whether it's an addiction or not, we could argue, but it's absolutely a self-destructive behavior. And yet, we've been falsely taught that, let's run with this a little bit. Anton, your comments are so good. So imagine you go to a spiritual teacher and they've got like all the props, they're wearing the robes, they've got a temple, and some way, somehow, you become convinced they're enlightened. And then they say to you, so the way to become enlightened and free is to inject this chemical into your arm. And you're like, what? And they're like, absolutely. All these other people here, they found freedom that way. And so you become convinced they're true and you start shooting up heroin. And like your life falls apart. You start to become destabilized. And then the guru is like, that's part of the process. You're letting go. You're surrendering. You're putting enlightenment first. And you're like, okay. And you give yourself some more of the drug and you become crazier and crazier. And the teacher is like, just keep taking more. Everything will be fine. This is part of the process. And you're like, okay. And you're like, life is going down the tubes. You're going down the tubes. That's actually what Neo-Advaita really is like. It's just a much slower, subtler process. There's really, in some ways, there's really no difference, which is really funny if you think about it. So Anton, amazing comments. Thank you. I'm gonna keep that metaphor for a while. Any other thoughts or comments or questions? And so this all then, of course, brings us to the question of, well, how to recover. So I've created I am creating a map that goes something like this. First, you need to understand the difference between Neo-Advaita and traditional Advaita, that Neo-Advaita is not actual Advaita and that it's harmful, and then to stop. To stop. And by the way, this model is not. Yeah, Anton, beautiful. I'll come back to that in a moment. Beautiful comment, Anton. And so this model is not linear. You don't have to. And again, it's just a model. So then stopping, Neo-Advaita thinking, Neo-Advaita meditation, reading, going to satsangs. And then the next part is beginning to recover. Or I should say starting to recover. That's things like taking an inventory of yourself and your life, finding support, starting to do healthy behaviors, beginning to learn coping skills to cope with your feelings other than dissociating. And dealing with relapse is that there's going to be back and forth where you go back into spiritual bypass. And that's been something that I've noticed in myself is finding other forms of spiritual bypass. So I'm working on this. I'm working on this model. People's input is always welcome. Anton, where is love in the teaching? Nowhere. A lot of Neo-Advaita teachers are very anti-bhakti, which is the path of devotion in Sanatana Dharma or Vedic philosophy, whereas devotion has an integral part in traditional non-duality. Ramana Maharshi himself was a devotee, was a bhakta, someone who practiced after his liberation. He practiced bhakta, devotion, bhakti. And occasionally, some Neo-Advaita teachers will talk about love, but for the most part, they won't. Whereas Ramana Maharshi said love is the actual form of God. Neo-Advaita teachers are obsessed with negating, denying, or destroying anything that has to do with form. Whereas traditional Advaita is about learning how to navigate form and how to live spiritual principles while in form, how to be free in form. And, for myself, bhakti, devotion, and love, cultivating love for God, has been a key part of my recovery because it's an integral practice, right? You focus on the absolute, yet it includes your humanity. In essence, you cultivate a relationship. One traditional Advaita teacher told me that in the beginning, even if you've heard the non-dual teaching, you act as if, in karma yoga, you take on the feeling of being wanting to serve God, and in bhakti yoga, you take on the attitude of loving God, of cultivating a relationship. Once those are in place, then down the road, you get to the phase of looking at transcending that personality. Anton, thank you. Very rich. Any others? Many of these teachers heartlessly tell people who are suffering that they are idiots stuck in their heads. Still, they claim there is no separation. How can they see idiots around them? And then a laughing emoji. I laugh and then I almost want to cry. It's so tragic. It's this twisted mental maze. Neo-Advaita is a twisted mental maze of all these ideas that contradict each other, that are harmful. And once you're caught in the maze, it's very hard to get out of. And it's hilarious and it's tragic. Yeah. Beautifully said, Anton. Beautifully said. All right, beautiful souls. I wish everyone here a beautiful, beautiful Neo-Advaita free day. And Thank you so much for spending some time reflecting on these things with me and your input. I listen very carefully, to the best of my ability. And so, when people share their insights about Neo-Advaita, I really reflect on them. And I'm working on a book, and I'm working on a course on how to recover from Neo-Advaita. So people's input gets put to use. Thank you so much. I wish you a blessed, blessed day. Thanks again, Anton. Take care.